We're really excited about this because I think it gives a really nice structured approach for someone stepping in for the first time into this realm of almost infinite possibility, right? Like that's I think the consistent sentiment we hear from people as they first kind of start to explore AI is that it's exciting at first and you get curious about things, and then around every corner, like every time you progress past a certain like step in the process and get a little bit more comfortable, you're met with this like another endless like realm of like choices, options, tools.
Welcome to another episode of the Tourism AI podcast, where Josh Houston and I explore different things, different concepts at the intersection of tourism and artificial intelligence. Really excited about today. What we're going to be talking about is something we've sort of co-created called the AI adoption hierarchy. And really, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word. I actually put this out on LinkedIn and asked for some feedback, and somebody was like, hierarchy, I'm not sure. But anyways, regardless, it's sort of a couple steps, different types of ways that different people can use AI. And I wanted to introduce today's podcast with something else that I've been sort of working on in a presentation, which is an academic named Ethan Mullick, Professor Ethan Mullick. He's at the Wharton School of Business, and he talks about something called the jagged edge of AI adoption. And this sort of aligns with me a little bit in terms of what we're going to talk about today, because at the end of the day, AI use and AI adoption is going to mean very many different things to very many different people. And so that's where Professor Marlick talks about this jagged edge, where it's like somebody might be way at the forefront doing all kinds of crazy stuff with all kinds of advanced tools. But reality is, the vast majority of us will probably just be using out of the box, simple tools, very simple prompts. And then
Yep.
there's like, a whole bunch of things in between all those different concepts. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time diving a little bit into the hierarchy, talking a little bit about sort of the different ways that you could think about what AI use means and AI adoption means. I see Josh is playing around. Oh, there we go. Now there we go. I like what you just did there, Josh. That's awesome. So this is kind of, I guess, the AI adoption hierarchy in sort of a one-page format. We actually have an ebook that we've created for the tourism industry to help people understand a little bit further. Okay, so if you're on step one using a free generative AI tool versus developing custom solutions, what that could look like from a implementation perspective. But I'm going to pause there, and Josh, maybe let you say a couple introductory things about this hierarchy, and then we can dive in.
We're really excited about this because I think it gives a really nice structured approach for someone stepping in for the first time into this realm of almost infinite possibility, right? Like that's I think the consistent sentiment we hear from people as they first kind of start to explore AI is that it's exciting at first and you get curious about things, and then around every corner, like every time you progress past a certain like step in the process and get a little bit more comfortable, you're met with this like another endless like realm of like choices, options, tools,
Yeah.
methods, frameworks, people telling you, gurus telling you like, all right, you got to do it this way. You got to use this prompt framework. You got to be a prompt engineer. You got to wear all these hats now. And that's just like overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about the hierarchy because it simplifies that for people. And what we've done here is help people like look at their own adoption journey. You could do this as an individual. You could look at this as like you and your company, you and your team. Like we've really tried to make it relatively universal. And the beauty of the hierarchy is like you don't have to progress to the end. Like there is really no
Yes.
end. Like we stopped at custom solutions because we did not want to like there's a million technical things you could do there, right? Not everybody's going to go down to that path, and that's totally okay. But what
Yeah.
we're excited about is hopefully creating an accessible journey for you, and helping people understand when is the right time to jump from one phase to the next, like from one level to the next level, starting with free tools and moving all the way up to like building your own stuff or using your own custom solutions that
Yeah.
other people have put together.
Yeah, and what I'll say is where this kind of concept came from for me is I would go and speak at I'd do presentations, keynotes at different conferences, and I'd always ask people, show of hands, who uses generative AI at work or AI
Mm.
tools at work, and I'd get, a growing amount of people every single time I speak raising their hands. And so then I would say, well, who's using a paid tool? And, 90% of the hands would go down. And so
Mm.
to me, it was like, okay, what does AI use actually mean? And sort of what's the difference between, then I would start to get into these things with presentations where it's like, okay, well, here's what a free tool gives you. Here's what paying $20 or $30 a month, whatever it is, gives you. And then, now I'm starting to, kind of put this in a little more detail into my presentations, because it's like, yeah, it's like you're just scratching the surface when you're using a free
Right.
tool. And there's a lot of limitations, and there's a lot of, things to consider when you're using free tools. So I think, Josh, let's start there. So when you're
Yeah.
using a free tool, what are some of the, I guess, cautions and considerations that people should sort of keep in mind when they're using these tools? I got a couple in my mind, but I wanted to throw it at you
Yeah.
first.
I think when you're at the free tier and you haven't invested yet, an important, like the first consideration is to explore. Like if there's three main providers that typically will draw people in for free tools. There's ChatGPT, which has a free tier that's pretty nice. They have access to some of their nicer models at the free level, including their custom GPT library, which is yeah, great for exploring. And you go to Anthropic and go talk to Claude. The Claude models are also available for free, and it's good to explore those two together. And then Google's product, Gemini, as well has a free tier, and I think it's really, really important as you're just getting involved and just learning the ropes, like to go to all these different platforms because it's not costing you anything but your time. And try having the same conversations with all of them. Try asking them about different things that you're curious about, starting with, a lot of people start with non-work related things like, how many letters or how many R's are in strawberry, like that. Like they just start with these like weird tests that, everybody has different ideas of like, how can I trip this thing up to prove if you're skeptical to prove that it's not going to help you. And if you're optimistic, it's like, oh, wow, I just ask it to do this thing that I have to, write every single day and it did it pretty good. But testing different platforms, I think, is it's always the first thing I like. When you're at the free tier, go test Perplexity too. It's a search tool that's free for starting, so that you get a feel for like how these things behave. Because I think that's the most like jarring element, and like that's what caused like the viral moment for AI in generative AI tools is like I can ask it to do something that like I do at work and get paid to do, and it just does it without,
Yeah.
without a cost, right? Like the cost isn't
Yeah.
on me. So it's cool to explore. And I think a lot of people have that aha moment as they're exploring.
And I'm going to pause you there and just make a couple comments. So, number one, when you're using the free tools or you're exploring the free tools, I always like to tell people start with very low risk things, right? So, high value maybe, but low risk for sure. And the reason for that is because when you're using a free tool, and now all the tools are different, so I'm gonna make a blank statement here, but you know, some of the tools when you're using the free version might use your prompts and what you're putting in as part of their training data. It's less secure, right? So
Mhm.
there's less security, data protection, all that kind of stuff. Once you get into the paid tools, it adds layers of security, which we'll talk about in a second. But just know that when you're using a free tool, it's sort of the highest risk AI use on them available to you. And so be very careful. So, just a couple of things that we like to, our friend Robert Mitchell, actually from WSI, likes to always talk about, recipes from a personal perspective. I love using AI from a recipes perspective because as opposed to going to Google and then going through the blue links and then finding a page on Google with a recipe, but having to scroll down for like 15 minutes to like find the actual recipe because there's all the SEO content above it. Literally, if you just say, how do I make my favorite one, because I almost do this on a weekly basis, is seafood chowder. My kids love seafood chowder. So almost weekly, I now know where it's stored in my chat history. But you
Yeah.
know, here's the recipe for this. It just gives you the recipe. And then, or you can be like, hey, I have these ingredients, give me
Hmm.
a recipe for whatever. So very, very low risk type of stuff. I mean, certainly you
Yeah.
can use it for work stuff, but just very, very important when you're using the free tools, just understand that that's the highest risk sort of situation when
Hmm.
compared to some of the other options. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the when you ask about limitations, the main limitation with the free tools is how much usage you get. They all have like previous, like I say, outdated models that they'll default you back to that are, just not as high quality. And it doesn't like dramatically in most cases like change, like if you're doing light work and not really like anything too serious, it doesn't really like inhibit. But like I think that's the threshold. When we get to that threshold of like you're ready to use this for something for work and be productive, it becomes really important to not get limited after, 10, 15 messages because
Yeah.
these things take time. And it's like mostly like I think mindset wise, like if you're curious and you're patient, those are the two things. Like you combine those two things and your conversations with whatever AI tool you're using are gonna, continue on, hopefully, like in a valuable way. If they're not valuable, you'll probably just jump off and be like, I'm not ready for this. And that's fine. But like generally, we can get whatever we want out of the system. It's just a matter of asking the right way.
Yeah.
So as people, I think that's maybe the transition from like going from a free tier to like which one do you upgrade on? I would say upgrading, you don't need to upgrade into all of them all at once, right? For some of us that makes sense because we just like use it nonstop and it's very helpful and we know how to like get our value. But for most people, you want to pick one and then like become pretty comfortable with that platform. So most people jump into ChatGPT and rock with that. In terms of which one's best, that's always a question people are talking about, and it's always kind of a source of debate. It's the one that works for you. That's the one that's best. Like
Yes.
new models come out every month or two and change the game, quote unquote, and become, oh, ChatGPT just got killed by Claude, or Gemini just released Notebook and that's killing Claude artifacts, or like all these things
Yeah.
start to like there's a cycle. And I think it's a toxic mindset to believe that like one tool is going to automatically change your game more than like marginally the other ones, right?
Yeah.
So I think in terms of which model you choose, the most common is ChatGPT. There's a huge argument we like to make for Anthropic Claude, like that's my daily driver, but it's really a matter of preference because I like Anthropic models I have for a year or two now. So the yeah, I think that decision to jump from free to paid is also when you're at the rate limit. Like when you're consistently, like if every day you're turning to your tool and it's a free tool, and every single day you're getting hit with the like, all right, you got to wait till 4 p.m. and then you can have new like a reset on your
Right.
message limit. Like if you're getting that constantly at the free level and you're seeing the value of saving time and doing things that you may not have been able to do before, that's a great time to pull the trig on, even on just a personal level. Like I bought these tools for myself before I had my company do that for me. It was worth it. I saved time. I get more done. I'm able to progress in the in my role. So for me on a personal level, it was worth it. If you have if you have a job with a company that will pay for it, like go bug them about how much time you're going to save, how much like productivity you can save or you can increase. Just that's like the most basic way to kind of unlock getting way more done, especially as you become more comfortable. And I think that, especially as a tourism pro, like you don't always have unlimited resources to hire more staff or get more support or, do just handle more. And one of the interesting things, it's like connected to, I guess in marketing, we always hear people say like we empower our clients, we help our customers, we give them something, and it's like pretty much before generative AI, that was just like a fluffy way of being like we have done branding and we think that people should know that we're trying to help them and that should make them trust us. But like AI actually does give power, like it gives you more power. You can get more done. And
Yeah.
for those who may have not had the ability to, make decisions or operate at a higher level or jump out of their like career path, like this is an opportunity for that, for you to level up, for you to learn something completely new that can game change. So we really hope to empower people as we, when we work with them. So that's a big
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah, and I should just mention quickly before we move on, basically every AI tool on the market offers a free tier or free option. So if you want to play with image generation tools,
Yep.
music creation tools, yesterday I made two Suno songs for presentations I'm going to be giving. Super fun. I like, so here's an example of, now I'm on the paid ChatGPT, but I like went into ChatGPT and said, "Hey, can you help me create lyrics? Here's what I want to write." Created me awesome lyrics. Then I went into Suno. I pasted those into my free version of, and came up with like 5 or 6 cool different versions of the same song. Pick the one I like. Now I'm gonna go to my client and I'm gonna open up with my "I love you, you guys are awesome" song. That's super fun, right? So
It
I mean that
is.
stuff's a little bit sort of fun and kitschy, but you can certainly do some cool stuff with it. And again, just before you dive in, play with the free tools and sort of see what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're talking about like the transition from free to paid. And once you get into the paid tier tools, there's options in most cases to customize stuff. ChatGPT has custom GPTs. Claude and the Anthropic models in that platform have artifacts or not, sorry, artifacts, custom projects that they call them. And the beauty of both of those upgrades is that you're able to start to not just talk to the generic version of the system that's been trained on everything, but now you're able to add knowledge base files, which is just any documents you want to add context to the chat. So if you're, creating, if you're a marketer for your tourism organization, you could add in your brand guidelines. You could add in sample blogs, sample SEO related tasks, or I guess writing that you've done in the backside of your website. You could load in social media captions and posts that you've made, and that's going to help the custom tool that you're starting to create now hone in on your brand. And that's just a very simple example of, if you have FAQs, you can load that document into one of these tools and then get those answers really quick. Or if you have like a long list of, say, activities and local things to do, and you're trying to help people find out information faster. Imagine how long it's going to take you to onboard a new employee who's not from the area, who just moved here for this job, to like understand all the local stuff. Like, you can hand them a very quick and easy to use way of gathering that information and sharing it with your customers. So there's all sorts of things now you get to unlock by opening the paid tier, as well as just like higher. You can chat for way longer before it's going to ask you to pause and come back later. Um, what's been your experience, Peter, with custom GPTs, as they, once you guys like invested and started, getting more and more into ChatGPT?
Yeah. So I mean, I basically only use custom GPTs almost exclusively, not 100%, but so I think I mentioned this in the last podcast episode, but I created a custom GPT that's my personal brand GPT. So it's sort of designed to sound like me and, knows all about me and, all the things I care about. So everything I that's what my go-to, my number one go-to custom GPT. But then in terms of individual, as an organization, we've created custom GPTs for things like each client has a custom GPT, each task within a client. So for example, this is the, tourism Kamloops, you know, PR GPT, or this is the, Métis Crossing SEO GPT or whatever, right? So we've created a lot. We're not even really close to where I want to be, but we're working on it. But essentially what we've done is we've created custom GPTs and then we share them with our team so that we're all kind of working from the same tool set and able to create more consistent outputs that align with. So, you mentioned things like putting in, brand guides or voice of the client, or ideal customer personas, or whatever it is you put into your custom GPT allows you to customize that tool for that very specific use case and purpose. And now
Mhm.
all of a sudden it takes away the, if Ben's writing something versus Kendall's writing something, if they're both using the same tool, theoretically it should more or less spit out at least a somewhat consistently sounding output for that client. And the other thing I'll say in terms of custom GPTs that really works well is putting in examples of finished products that are, basically examples for the tool to say, this is what I want it to sound like, this is what I want it to look like. So I have a
Mhm.
client that I do a little bit of advocacy for, and so here's a sample letter to government, and this is the format, and this is what I want it to look like, and here's the tone, here's a press release, and here's the format. And so now when it spits things out, for example, in a press release, there's always the about section on the bottom, right? And Crystal Churcher is always the person that gets quoted. And so because I've loaded those things in and I've given it some custom instructions, every time I say, hey, I want help writing a press release, all I really do now is I go into my custom GPT and I say, hey, ChatGPT, I want help writing a press release for ACE. I'm in the ACE GPT. And, I basically just like spit out everything that's on my mind in terms of what's going to go into the press release. Comes out perfectly formatted. Crystal is quoted properly. You know what I mean? So it just sort of takes away. It really creates consistency across the board,
Yeah.
which I really like about it. Yeah.
I think it's like so important, especially for people to realize like what you would have, like if you treat a custom GPT in your relationship in the chats like you were hiring a third party who wasn't already familiar with your, like, think about an agency. If you were hiring an agency to help you do this thing, if you had an EA that you just brought in and they didn't know you beforehand, what information do they need to know about you for you to feel confident and trust that they will do a great job of the thing that you want them to do? Which means you have to start creating documentation. We talked about this in the last pod. The whole idea now is like, if you can write it down and be clear about how you want it to sound, what, like, especially like when it comes to the content drafting and marketing related stuff. If you can articulate why the brand talks this way, what the tone of voice means, not just like, oh, casual tone of voice. Like, you need to describe what and why and how, and like I think it's like that who, what, when, where, why. I don't know. When I was growing up learning how to write, that was always the question we would ask of like every paragraph or sentence, like who, what, when, where, why. Like it needs to be clear what's happening. And I think it's easy to get sloppy with that because you get comfortable, or you may not ever write these things down, like why you're doing or how you're doing. But this sort of custom GPT opportunity solves for issues with turnover, or being able to be more generalized in terms of your team, and how you partner with everybody else that you work with. For so long, it's been, everybody has their own lanes, and you don't have to like share your lanes, because that's honestly not very like productive or effective. Because if I have these five clients or these five brands I write with, or I just do the SEO, or I just do the Instagram and Facebook, like these little lanes have formed over the time, because people specialize. But once you start to leverage generative AI tools, that becomes like a bridge between these lanes, and now all of a sudden, if someone's out sick, we can step in and support them. And it's as
Yeah.
simple as, like you said, like the two different people on your team being able to pass like this week, that week, stuff back and forth if need be.
Yeah, I love that. And what I'll say too is like, we've sort of, I guess, come to this with every subject matter expert creating their own custom GPTs based on, their sort of, I guess, experience and what they know. But where we're at as an organization, we just brought on a couple new people. So I'm going to be we have a project internally called Project Trailblazer. So I'm going to be reintroducing that project. And we're going to basically go through this process sort of from scratch again to
Yep.
improve and optimize our GPTs. But I like what you said there about the who, what, when, where, why. So for example, like what I want to do is I want to create now a standard set of documents for each task and each client and each sort of everything that we want the custom GPT to do. So that way it's very consistent across the entire organization, across clients, across tasks. And then to your
Hmm.
point, it's like this is a game changer in terms of cross training, covering shifts, all that type of stuff. Because theoretically, anybody should be able to go in. We'll create some SOPs as well. Maybe
Hmm.
it's a custom GPT also that's an SOP that you could talk to and say, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it gives you the answers or whatever, right? So, but that's
Right.
a big game changer. Yeah. And the other thing I'll mention quickly too is I don't actually know. I think it might be in the free. We're talking about ChatGPT right now, but it might be in the free tool now. It never used to be, but custom instructions as well. So, in
Hmm.
addition to custom GPTs, you can also customize your actual instance for yourself. So, for example, I don't know how Claude is. I don't use it enough. I need to use it
Hmm.
more. But in ChatGPT, it says, tell me a little bit about yourself. So, I'm the president of this company. I do this. This is what I care about. Blah blah blah. And then tell me how you want me to respond. And so,
Yeah.
in that, tell me how do you want me to respond. I've given it very specific instructions. When I'm writing letters to government, I want this tone. I want this length. When I'm writing blogs, I want it to sound like this. When I'm writing
Yep.
marketing copy, it should sound like this. Avoid these types of transitions. I'm very specific in my custom
Hmm.
instructions on, because, it's funny. So I mentioned Ben, who just started with us. He was like, every time I write a blog using ChatGPT about, for Tourism AI Network, it starts with this phrase about in today's world of, technological change or
Yeah.
whatever. He's like, how do I stop it from saying that every single time? And I'm like, well, in your custom instructions, you could tell it, don't use these types of phrases, and then it won't.
Hmm.
So that's sort of the custom instructions is sort of a blanket,
Right.
almost custom GPT for yourself for your instance, and
Hmm.
then the custom GPTs then are sort of built on top of that,
Yeah.
and so the tool kind of takes both into account, and then it makes it better.
Yeah, that's super powerful too for working with like different brands, and knowing that, like, hey, we are an agency. We have a lot of different clients. They have their own different brand voices. And in every instance, you should be double checking against the client and their brand guideline and their writing instruction, right? Like, and it's a way to then not have to, like, I think earlier on in like the last year or so, once like the AI bubble started, whether or not it's, I guess, a bubble to pop is like still cat's not out the bag. But like this bubble starts, this huge wave of popularity, and all these people are like, yeah, become a prompt engineer. This is the career now that's hot. And it's like it only took like 6 months to automate prompt engineering in terms of like structured prompting and all that. Like it really wasn't like it was very easy for us to figure out how to, like, oh well, if it's organized and structured and we have examples, like that's what AI is good at. So no need to have like that specialized technical approach to prompting. But I think what this allows, like custom instructions and custom GPTs, is where you want to be a little bit more structured in your approach. And so it's what I love about that option is that we can build that in once and not have it be like, because the prompt engineering like gurus were like, every single chat you need to have this framework. You say the ACE framework or like the Risen framework or whatever. It's like role, goal, all these things. Like if you're doing that for every chat, it's super inefficient. So what custom instructions allow is for you to have some of those instructions just be embedded into every conversation. And then whatever is variable, when you're creating a custom GPT, you either have the variables in a file that you just quickly upload, and then it's that simple, and then where you don't have to like copy paste and do all this extra stuff, or you just embed it into the custom GPT instructions and you don't have to deal with it more than once. So that's created a more accessible way for us to help people too, because not everybody needs to be, an expert or super, super, super confident in their prompting abilities. If they can define to us what they need, then we can help them get the thing that helps them exactly how it's supposed to.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So what I'll say, I'm going to go back to the jagged edge of AI adoption and just make the comment that very likely the vast majority of people will probably not really go beyond
Mm.
these first three steps,
Yep.
but they may use tools that go beyond these the first three steps, because in their organizations may create sort of other tools using some of these other steps.
Hmm.
So let's dive into I
Next
think one
phase.
exciting one is low code, no code. And then I think it probably fits a little bit into the API connection. Those things
Yep.
may kind of
Those
go
two
together a
go
little bit.
pretty hand in hand. So the next level that we kind of talk to, and this is more educational than what we try to push people to become like individual experts on no code and API integration is like quasi, in many cases it's actually like coding. So it is programming, not no code. But there are tools that everybody's using that can connect to different tools. Most SaaS software as a service tools that you use, like HubSpot, like even like the Google Suite, Docs, and if you're in Microsoft, like any of those products, PowerPoint, Word, they all have backends that developers can connect to do things with. So for example, we will often be connecting, say, a custom GPT to someone's calendar. And it's a really good example of like, okay, you have a calendar, but like if someone asks you your availability, who knows? But if and there's a lot of ways to share calendar, so it is kind of the example kind of fails in some regards. But like we can connect ChatGPT to your calendar so it can check your availability and suggest times, which is like really helpful when it's not just you who's like selling off your time to other people. We get busy and sometimes team members will be booking on our behalf. Like, yes, you could use Calendly and pay for an extra service. Yes, you could, like, if you're directly connected to someone's calendar, great. But like sometimes when you're offering up to clients, or even just like collaborators or industry people or friends, it's like, you want to extend an invitation but also not have to do the admin of like, hey, when are you free? I'm free these times. So you just connect your calendar and let someone chat with it, right? And then they can book and whatever, and it shows up on your meeting, which is great. But yeah, low code tools, and there's a lot of like low code building tools that will allow you to do the API integrations in a pretty streamlined way. Tools like Zapier, Make.com are the most two like common, I would say. They've been in the game the longest, and they allow you to extend the functionality of your, GPT. So if you're just strictly looking at, trying to enhance ChatGPT experience, you can add custom actions when you get into the GPT builder that can control other systems. And all it is every platform that has a backend API that we can access has a list of things that you can do and access within that app, given you provide credentials and stuff, so you can accomplish more. In addition to that, you can also do more prompt. We have some where we just do more prompting in a more structured way. Like we have a prompt chain that we want to use, which is multiple like chats put together and then run it back into the chat. So it's basically enabling someone to get a lot more done, but they may not have like the technical ability or know how to create, so like more advanced prompt chains. So we create the prompt chain once, attach it to a custom GPT, and then the custom GPT kind of serves as this like relay between the user and the automation, which is kind of a cool way to connect the dots. But the main thing here is that you can start to introduce delegation to your AI experience. And that's really what no code and automations and integrations do for you, is instead of having to be the main user driving all the action, now you can have stuff that happens in the background. Like every time I go into a Zoom meeting, my AI assistant comes to the meeting, and this is a no code tool that records and transcribes the call. It summarizes it and creates a list of action items. When the meeting ends, that automatically triggers automations that then send it to different places. Like some of those tasks get sent to my project management tool. Some of them get sent in an email back to everybody that was like, hey, here's what we talked about in the meeting. If you missed it, here are the action items for everybody that said, they were going to do stuff. And we're going to follow up based off the conversation. It sounds like next week. Those things start to happen in the background when, everybody can imagine a time when that used to be like the job. Like I used to go be the meeting minutes person and then spend an hour or two after the call, like writing all these things out in emails and updating tools and like sharing files and like trying to, keep everybody in the loop. Now that can be done automatically. And that's really the power of integration. And it can be done with no code. And so as you start to explore your AI journey, these opportunities for delegation become more clear. And that's really when you want to start having a conversation with someone who can help you connect the dots, who can help you build the integration, who can help you extend what you need done into, a smarter system, just a better way of doing business. And it definitely challenges. This is where I think it first starts to challenge people in their egos, because for so long, so many people have been used to doing all that work. Like when we talk to executive assistants who are really good meeting minutes people, like it's kind of threatening to be told like, well, we could just have this tool join and do all that, your work for you. And it's like, is it the right answer to say they shouldn't be at the meeting? No, they could still be a power player at the meeting. The executive assistants know more than anybody most of the time. So it's like their roles and their tasks shift from maybe just being admin in the background to like being the context in the room. Like you are the connector. What your person knows, and you also know what they need to know. And you can now become an extension in a more powerful way of them. And that's where we start to like, we have to deal a lot with changing the way people work, and that's like more of a people thing than a tech thing. And I think that's one of the main themes that we talk about in this podcast. It sounds like will be recurring all the way through, all the conversations. Is it's a people thing, not a tech thing in most cases.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I just wanted to, I'll tell you one thing that comes up literally in every conversation I have about AI is like, how can you help me make email less of a pain in my butt?
Yeah,
And I guess I wanted to sort of throw that out there is that where this low code, no code potential option fits in? Is that sort of the right spot where now all of a
yeah,
sudden you can create some intelligent automations using the low code, no code tool, and maybe
totally.
it'll filter some things out for you, or it'll create action items based on emails or, whatever. So can you just maybe spend a
Yeah.
couple minutes talking about that?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great use case because email is something everybody has. There's a couple things. One, there are tools that exist that you can connect your email to that will use AI to like handle that. Like there's a tool I tried and tested called Spark, and it's like pretty cheap. It was like $8 a month or something. And it looks at every email and decides if it's even relevant to you based off of the criteria you set. Is it even something you should see? And so its whole job is like, let's keep your inbox at zero. Like it archives things that are promotions. It takes away things that aren't relevant. It'll always ask you. So there's always a learning phase where it goes through the process of figuring out like if you tell it to like, and you can do this in Google, like when you tell it to unsubscribe from a certain type of thing, it'll be like, hey, I found these 25 other ones that are pretty much the same, sending you a weekly drip email with promotion stuff, asking for your money. Do you want to like hide those too? And so that's like one example of like just a no-code tool. And then when we talk about integration and extending like the capability of just like a blank platform, you can set it up so that every day the emails that you get sent get tagged and by an LLM. They're gonna, it's gonna pass basically through ChatGPT in the background to tag, is this sales related? Is this a customer service question? Is this billing? Is this an invoice? Like you can define all the tags and let it like categorize, we call it classification, the items. And then based off of the tag that it adds or the label that it adds to the email, then we'll sort in your inbox where it needs to go. So if it's a promotion, right, it might not even hit your box. It might just get like deleted and thrown away. But if it's someone from your team, and you can set it up so that it's also like if it's certain people, like anybody who has this URL, it'll always like make sure that they're rising to the top and get tagged a certain way. That's like a very simple way of doing that in the background. Like traditionally, yeah, you might have hired somebody to help you do this at like, as an assistant, like a virtual assistant that's going to help like basically manage that inbox. People are also using AI to roll up like, here was the digest of your email inbox today, which I think is interesting. Like it's basically offering like, hey, I got 25 emails this afternoon. And ChatGPT looks at that and is like, well, four of those don't matter. Five of them are pertinent and like need to do something, like they're asking for your action now. And then there's others that are like, not sure yet. Maybe you need to look into that. And it can just like roll that into your Slack or wherever you want it, WhatsApp or wherever you want it to go. So there's, yeah, email is definitely like a good example of like using integrations. And it's not like we're custom coding much of anything. It's a prompt engineering task in most cases, or it's a direct like get the things connected with no code tools.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. And I think that's again, I probably a low hanging fruit use case that is the bane of everybody's existence. So
Yeah,
definitely maybe what we'll do, maybe Josh, at some point is maybe you can do a little demo or something
sure.
like that, just to show people what's possible. Because I think again, I think what I come across often is, and this is where I'm going to go back to Professor Ethan Mollick, who talks about this concept of HR as R&D. And what he talks about is
Mm.
at the end of the day, it's the individual users at the individual user levels that need to like experiment with this because they know, Christina, my business partner, doesn't know which emails are relevant to me. I know which emails are relevant to me, right? So if I'm going to be using a tool like this, I'm the one that has to go through this process myself to sort of like teach the AI on
Mhm.
kind of, okay, this email, yes, this email, no, whatever, put this here, put this there, right? And it is sort of an individual basis. And this is not going to work, I don't think, from a corporate level where, corporate comes in and says, okay, here's how we're going to do your email going forward. I
Yeah,
could be wrong, but I don't anticipate that it's going to work well if you do it
right.
that way, right? So yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I guess where I'm going with this is everybody needs to spend some time playing with the tools, experimenting, because I think that our creativity is the limit on what's possible. And you're only going to know once you start playing with the tools, getting more comfortable, trying things, that kind of thing, and then also being exposed. So obviously that's what we're trying to do, is expose people to there are other possibilities beyond just what you're doing today that
Mhm.
may help solve some big problems for you. Here's just some ideas, that type of thing,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's all about where people lose their time and get sucked in.
Yeah.
And I think that's where no code can be a really like it's like surprising. And even to developers, this is an interesting like intersection we won't go too into, but like I often sit in the middle of like developers who are full stack guys who like their mindset is like I need to build something that a million people could use because that's what you're taught when you learn how to program. And then I sit with a lot of no code experts and people who are the best in the world at making things happen really quickly in really powerful ways, but not like programming. And they just don't understand, like, there's a huge gap in the understanding. And as a normal person trying to learn how to build stuff, like, that was something on my journey when I explored that. It took me like the better part of a year to figure out no code tooling. And so don't be like fool. Like, we now encourage people to just like stay away, like, unless you're like kind of techie and you like to build stuff and that tinkering and figuring it out. Like, if that's you, go for it. But most people aren't that. They just want something to work. And it's really frustrating when you start to build stuff that like you can't figure out the little details because it's always the little details that bug. That's where bugs are. They're little nuances, little like I don't know why this is returning this and it says this, but there's nothing on the internet that says why, right? Like those are the types of things that you could just like stumble into. And so this is where we start to encourage people like, hey, that's why we should help you. We have people who do this every day who like this is their like easy button, work with someone who knows what they're doing. And that's maybe the right segue to the more advanced stuff when we talk about RAG, which is retrieval. Think of RAG as like the long-term memory of an AI tool, which it has overlap to customizing like on a basic level in a no code way. When you build a custom GPT and you add a knowledge base to that, you're creating memory for the tool to like reference. That's really good for internal use cases and it's really good for like your inside of ChatGPT. But the moment you want to put that somewhere else, now all of a sudden you need to level up the whole infrastructure and create a lot more customization because it's important when you put this in front of someone else that it behaves exactly like it should. Not just behaves, but that the memory is right and it doesn't make things up. Because I think we could all like find examples of companies who did stuff with good intention, trying to, oh, let's add a chatbot to the website, and then people can get faster customer service. And like we look at some of those dealership like extreme examples of like, well, we gave away a Tahoe today for free. And the law is like, yeah, you did. Like that's a $80,000, problem right now. This is why this is the more advanced side of things. It's customized and we orchestrate the whole workflow so that your chatbot goes to do exactly what it's supposed to do, and we can connect it to APIs and integrate it with other tools and give it more functionality, which is great. It's just far beyond the like cheap and cheerful, I think is a phrase one of my friends and colleagues says a lot. Cheap and cheerful solutions that are, very accessible to all. And same with custom solutions. When we talk about custom solutions, that could range from using a white label platform that someone else has prepared, and customizing for your own use cases and adding your own, infrastructure to it and adding, additions and plugins and whatnot. Like we often do that. Like we're working on a project like that for our clients and anybody in the tourism space to receive like all of the not just custom GPTs that we build, but all the other tools, the automations that some of these things we're putting together, a one cohesive platform so that everybody can access what they need. And it's way more scalable in this case than like just trying to share, custom GPTs with people and just trying to like just pull them in very briefly. So developing custom means you get to start to like customize all the things. It just takes a lot more time and it costs a lot more money and it's a lot more involved, a lot more decisions have to be made, which is well worth it in many cases, but not something that everybody's going to really like explore when on your journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, yeah, so I think just quickly, I'm just going to summarize a couple of things and make a couple of points, but retrieval augmented generation literally is just generating outputs based on, augmented by, essentially a knowledge base, right? So it'll
Yeah.
only sort of talk to those documents and it'll only
Mhm.
produce answers based on those documents, right? So that's
Yep.
a very big difference from using it, out of the box Claude or Chat GPT, which is trained
Right.
on the world's knowledge. This is just specifically trained on the information you put into it. And we, before this podcast started, we actually were talking about Google's new tool called Notebook LM, which, it's brand new. It's just in beta mode. We don't know if it's going to work out great, but it's an example where you can put in, for example, a 300-page PDF, whatever, and then you can talk to that document specifically and ask
Mhm.
questions about, hey, what does it say about this? What are the deliverables about that? So I think about that from concept, conceptually, I think that tool would be really cool. For example, if you're responding to an RFP and you have this giant RFP document, well,
Mhm.
rather than sitting there and trying to understand all of the, like, these RFPs are the worst written documents in the history
Yeah.
of humanity, I think. But maybe now you have a tool where you can start asking it questions. Okay, what are the timelines? What are the deliverables? And it'll actually kind of it'll just sort of give you the information you're looking for, take away all the fluff and all the other sort of garbage that's in those documents, just as an example, right? But that's an out of the box kind of RAG solution, but obviously you can custom build RAG solutions. And then finally, I'll just say, what you mentioned there, Josh, is, we're building our own custom platform that's going to sort of allow us to then make solutions available to tourism clients that are part of something that we're building that we're going to announce soon. So I'm not going to talk about it today, but the goal here is, yeah, all of a sudden we're building all these tools for you. You can access them. And I think on this platform we're building also, you might be able to use Claude for some tasks, Chat GPT for other tasks. And so you'll have the ability to use different tools or toggle between tools for one subscription price, as opposed to having to buy all the different tools separately. Is that correct or fair? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So
Nice.
because there's new models coming out like every week, every month, like there's new changes, there's advances, and all the main providers take turns being like the best for their moment. We think it's good to have flexibility, and I think that's going to be a huge value prop to our users because when you commit to say ChatGPT, you're spending $30 a month for the team plan, and if Claude is better for 6 months, which so far has been like this year's case, like we've been using Claude exclusively, and we have a small team, so it's not like a huge expense to like do both. But if you have 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, like you don't double up on a $30 a month per person thing. And that's the beauty of a tool like this is you actually don't have to pay you just pay one fee and you get access to all of them.
To all of them.
And that way, you can choose and we can help choose too, based off of our know-how to say like, well, we're going to upgrade everything because Strawberry came out, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe it's better than Claude today. And then Claude's going to come out with the whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
And then Google finally is going to maybe do something competitive, right? Like I always shit on Google, but you have to see something great from them that's like available to everybody and helpful
Yeah.
for all. That's, I think, the main thing they struggle with. But like, yeah, that the whole point is giving us flexibility, perplexity, adding more features like searching the internet that, ChatGPT doesn't have yet and it's coming. Maybe it's going to be great when it comes. Great. Then we'll implement it into our system then too. So that's the beauty of customizing is now we get to kind of take the best of all the worlds, combine them into one useful system that is kind of one chatbot experience for all.
I wanted to maybe just sort of say one more thing because it was sparked by something you just said there. Obviously, these tools cost money, and one of the big mistakes I've seen happen. This is definitely on the larger company side, but also I think even on a small, medium-sized business side, it's like, hey, we just gave 1,000 people access to, this ChatGPT Teams or whatever it is, and it cost us, I don't know how many millions of dollars to do it, and we're not getting value out of this tool. And it's like, that is not the right approach. So,
Yeah.
obviously, maybe give it to a small team first, do some testing, understand the use cases. Like, don't just sort of buy it for everybody right out of the gate and say,
Mhm.
and then conclude it doesn't work because you didn't implement it correctly. It's not the tool, it's the implementation there that failed, right? And I've seen a bunch of examples of that. And so this is where we talk about the AI adoption framework and doing literacy and education and showing people how to use the tools first, right?
Yep.
So we always talk, again, that the reoccurring theme you're probably going to hear on this podcast is that AI adoption is a people and culture issue before it's a technology issue. And so if you're
Yep.
just running to the solution and you're paying obscene amounts of money so that all your team have access to the best tool on the market, but you haven't spent the time up front doing the people and culture first and the systems and processes stuff and education and literacy and all the things that are actually really, really important, you're not going to see the value and you're going to conclude that these things don't work. And it is so unfortunate if that's the conclusion you come to, because I think you and I can both speak to the fact that that's not the fact or the case or the reality. It's
Mhm.
like, it's back to this jagged edge of adoption. It's like the organizations that take a systematic sort of approach and do the right things are going to see value. It's just hard
Yeah.
to imagine how you're not, right? So
Right. And
yeah.
it's those, it often is like workshops. It's like having someone hold your hand a little bit, give you some exercises and activities to test out that really like get people in. And I think the biggest win in those two is that your skeptics might find their aha moment. Once people have an aha moment and their curiosity can start to take over, then I think they're really set to like go be productive. Because like it just takes believing like and trusting that this tool is actually going to be helpful. There's a lot of people coming skeptical and are like, I tried it 6 months ago and it was just garbage. And it's like, yeah, that's probably true. But have you tried learning how to talk to it? And it's like I say that like a little tongue in cheek, but like learn like helping people understand like how to communicate to these things in a way that will help them get what they want faster or better is like really the difference. And we've seen people like consistently come out of like even just a couple training workshops and save 2 hours a day, like every single day. And it's like, how do you not justify spending the $30 at that point, right? But if you buy a tool like to Peter, to your point, if you buy 1,000 licenses and 85% don't get used, that 15% is probably not making up for it. And so it's really important with adoption that like the right people have, and then this is why the progression matters. Like get people onto the free plan until they're ready to like till they're coming to you. If you're the admin side, you're the leadership, like you should have an open invite for your team to come pitch you on these tools that they want to use because that's gonna like once they're ready to start using these things, it's gonna be really productive. They can be really productive. And if you're willing to invest in their training and help them like change the way that they work by unlocking these tools for them, like it's really a game changer. But yeah, like just left in the wild, like it's kind of a free for all, and you don't really like that's not a good way to run business as a free for
Yeah.
all.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Love it. Awesome. Josh, thank you so much. Great conversation. I think I even learned a few things here, which is always helpful. So hopefully others learned as well. So certainly I will say that the AI adoption hierarchy is the visual you saw on the screen is something that we have at Tourism AI Network. We also have an ebook that we've created. It's part of our education sort of, I guess, courses and things like that. So we will be making some announcements soon about that and showing you and telling you how you can access some of these resources to help your team sort of figure out the AI journey as you start to think a little bit deeper beyond just sort of free tools and the Wild West, which many
Hmm.
companies are currently experiencing. So thanks a lot, Josh.
Great chat, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining Peter and Josh on another episode of the Tourism AI podcast, where they dive into the AI tools they're building to help tourism operators and DMOs perform, as well as other relevant updates for the tourism industry. Stay up to date between episodes at tourismainetwork.com or on socials at Tourism AI Network.